Hi, hope you guys are doing well. This video is about INFPs and INTJs if they're a good match. They're not. Thanks for watching. I'm just kidding. It's actually a pretty decent match, all things considered. In my experience, most N types, intuitive, when they have N in the letters, they actually have a good, deep, strong bond. So it's actually pretty decent. And in a lot of ways, INFPs aren't really that different than an ENFP. ENFPs tend to be the least extroverted of all the extroverts. That's why we can get along with INTJs and ENFPs so well. So I imagine INFPs would get along pretty well as well. I don't have a lot of personal experience about it, but that's why I wonder why you're asking me. But I do know my type pretty well, and I can figure things out. But don't take my word for it. I'm just some guy with a YouTube channel. But first off, don't treat MBTI like it's some kind of horoscope. Like he's a Cancer, I'm a Taurus. I don't know. No, don't treat it like that. Any type can get along with another type, and it's not an exact science, but it does give you an idea of what to expect. So I suppose that's why you asked me the question, because INTJ is hard to figure out. So I'll give you some of my advice and pointers. But before we go further, though, I think a better indicator of relationship success is the Big Five, which you may have heard about. I'd Google that if I was you, if you haven't. Another thing is just attachment theory. Those two things will tell you about success relationship real easily. That being said, like I said earlier, any type can get along with another type. It just requires a lot of work if it's not a good match. However, like N types, like I said, I think they get along pretty well, especially ENFPs and INFPs with INTJs. So I think one of the things that's really great about INFP is that they can actually see a lot of emotional depth in others. They're really good at reading other people. And INTJs are really hard to read. So I think that is the same thing they share with ENFPs. And that's what is going to carry the day in a lot of instances, because INTJs are so used to being misunderstood by everyone. I think an INFP will see through that real quickly. So that's wonderful. An INFP also is introverted as well as an INTJ. So I don't think that's one of the major hiccups with the ENFP relationship, is that the INTJs struggle to let the ENFP know that it's like, hey, look, I can't always go out all the time, or my battery's dead, can we go home, or I really don't want to go to that party. And ENFP has to adjust to that. Fortunately, an INFP shouldn't have that problem. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought because I was going for a drink. This video is brought to you by wine, its sponsor. Just wine in general, not specific wine. This is the first time I've tasted, so we'll see. Yeah, it's pretty good. It works. I like it. It has some bite to it. Okay. With all N types, they tend to be future-orientated, big ideas. So INTJ, INFP will both hate small talk, hate talking about the weather, maybe not like to talk about sports teams and things like that. They're talking about where they are where they're going, what are your plans in the next 5 years, where do you see society or us going in the future. So that's really a good thing. Some relationships don't have that. That being said, there are some problems with it, and they're really not that bad. But generally, if you're both exactly the same, it's not so good. You want the other person to round out your faults. So with the INFP and INTJ, they actually do have some dissimilarities, but the main thing they have in common is the introversion. And I see that as causing some problems. Although it solves some problems, it can cause other problems that you may not be used to. For example, I've dated a lot of introverted people before. So, it may sound good to have both the introverts really good, but realistically, if you're in a relationship, having one person extroverted and one person introverted helps, because if you have to go to a restaurant and you want to make reservations, or if there's a problem with car rental, going to be able to talk to the person, or if down the road you have kids and they have a problem with the teacher or the school system, and be able to talk and express things effectively is a useful thing. And that's where having your partner being strong where you're weak really helps out. There may be some problems. Also with with the people they're both are introverted. And first off, usually I don't see that too much in relationships a whole lot because, I mean, it takes one person to approach the other. And if you're both introverted, it may not happen as frequently. But like I said, I've dated a lot of introverts. I usually made the first move now that I think of it. But yeah, the thing with they're both introverts, it makes it a little harder in the sense that you tend not to talk about things you should talk about. And a lot of times, introverts are assuming that the other person's on the same page as them when they're really not. And that's kind of a problem with INFPs. And INFP, they go off on, that's what they say about INFPs, that they're hardest to read. And INTJs are not good at reading people when it comes to emotion, period. I do okay, but I rely heavily on my analytical abilities and my intuition and my understanding of psychology and body language, but I do it through a synthetic means, through analysis and logic. But someone who's NF, they just do it naturally all on their own, so they can read people so much better. So an INFP, since they're introverted, they're a lot harder to read. So the INTJ will not be on the same page as you often. And that's, if you're both an extroverted ENFP would say things more often. An introverted person will withdraw into themselves just like an INTJ would. And that's the problem, is you both may have a problem. Instead of talking about it, you'll pull apart and go to your separate corners and assume the other person's on the same page when actually you're not. So I'd recommend you actually make a concerted effort to talk about things that are important to you. The things like big deal breakers in relationships, like, politics, religion, you want to have kids or not? Do you plan on getting married? Instead of assuming, you might like indirectly hint, well, one day it'd be nice to be married. And to you, that may sound like you're trying to ask them if marriage is okay. But in fact, INTJ might interpret it, you're just being open-minded. And it might come and bite you in the butt later down the road when it really is important to you. So that's why you don't want to leave things to guess. And it's kind of a cliche. They say that, women, they just want guys to read their minds. It's not fair. Well, it's true. And like you ask women, sometimes they say, I'm assuming a woman is an INFP in this scenario, just based on statistics. But I do that because I put myself in the INTJ position. I apologize if that's not the case. But, a lot of women, I met, they want the guy or the partner to read their mind. And the fact that they have to say it to the guy, be blunt, it kind of hurts their feelings that he should have had the effort to read it. But it's like expecting your partner to read your mind is not fair. Especially with an INTJ, they're pretty dense in that way. Because we're not good at reading minds. And one thing you'll find about the biggest takeaway from Myers-Briggs stuff is that realizing that everyone's different than you. They've had not only different personalities, but they've experienced life differently than you. So when you say something or you may do something, they'll interpret it differently. And INTJs interpret things like robots, like machines. And if it's not logical, if it can't be made logical, we have a hard time. So that's where you got to be a little more blunt. And on that note of being blunt, that's the only other hiccup I see with this kind of matchup, and the same thing with ENFPs, is that most NF types are very sensitive. And INTJs are very insensitive. We're very blunt. And if they're mature and you've developed yourself and put some effort into your self-improvement, you're less blunt. You can be more careful. But a lot of times it just happens, and we don't mean it. And that's when you got to communicate. So, does this dress make me look fat? It's like, no, the dress doesn't make you look fat, but it doesn't look good on you. And you both pull apart. You don't talk about it. And I suspect also with INFPs, they're going to be like ENFPs, is that they don't want to address things, so they assume the other person is as sensitive as they are, and they keep it to themselves. And tension builds and builds, and it's like a volcano, and it erupts. I imagine it's probably worse for an INFP because they internalize just like an INTJ does. So you do want to make a conscious effort to talk to people. Like, this is how I felt. This is what you said. This is how it hurt my feelings. Because you can't let that be guesswork for the INTJ, because they're going to be like a machine. And when it comes to emotions, they're clueless. And for me, I feel like I'm a caveman when it comes to emotions. I jokingly say that I'm usually 10 years behind in my emotional intelligence. So, I mean, in my 20s, I was like a teenager. In my 30s, I was like a 20-year-old. I was very smart and intelligent, but I just didn't have any experience, raw experience. So I'll have an emotional reaction. I don't know what to do with it. What is this thing? And like I get in a fight with someone, my partner, and once you start to get in a fight, she would cross some line or upset me, and I get upset. And I'm like, I go in caveman mode. I feel bad. You did hurt me, and that's the best I can do. Then the next day I'm like teenager mode. Dude, that wasn't cool. That didn't jive with me what you did and said. And then another day after that, I might be like, okay, how you flirted with that person. It looked like you were flirting, and I have insecurities. And like the fourth day, I might be able to put in like technical terms that I've read about, and like, oh, so that's one thing. INTJs may not rise to the occasion, but INFPs, I think they are much more in tune with others' emotions, so that shouldn't be that big a deal. However, a lot of times I've noticed with NF types in general is that they have these exchanges with people, and it's as if the only currency they're accepting is emotion. For example, my mother, who's an INFJ, she would come home from work and like something bad would happen. And it's like, this woman, she just yelled in my face today, and she's just rude and took my pencils or whatever, just an example. And I go into guy mode, analytical mode. Let me try to fix it. It's just how guys, analytical people, we have a hard time turning off the analytical side. Now that I'm older and mature, I know just, okay, let's just open up. She wants to vent. Instead of saying, you should guard your pencils more carefully. The red stapler, you should protect it and put it in your drawer. That's how you fix it. They don't want it fixed. NF types or emotional types, they want to vent. And the fact that something emotional happens, I don't express it emotionally doesn't mean I don't care. So being able to, instead of saying, you should protect your stapler, how you say, so they took your stapler. How does it make you feel? Oh, you feel sad? All right. I mean, just not so condescending like I said it, but I mean, that's basically what you do. You just let them, and once it's off their chest, then you could try to fix it. Like in the future, you could do this, but you want to come at them in that way. A lot of INTJs don't, and in fact, cheers. In fact, I mean, if you have a really strong emotional response to something, whatever, let's say, for example, you're driving. I had this one time with a girlfriend. She had a flat tire. She had AA or AAA insurance service. She had a flat tire. She called me. She has AAA. Why did she call me? But dutifully as a guy, I showed up because I was her boyfriend. But that was a good gesture. I reassured her. But a lot of times, a logical person like an INTJ, something emotional, she feels vulnerable and stressed. It would happen, and she has an emotional response. And some with younger and inexperienced INTJs, emotion hits them and they shut down. And if it's really bad, they'll trivialize, like, why do you? That's ridiculous. You're being stupid, or you're being overly emotional. And just because someone has an emotional reaction doesn't mean they're not right, or they don't have a right to feel that way. So that's one thing an INTJ has to learn, is that they can't always apply logic where it doesn't belong. And there's instances like when someone has emotion, that's fine. But a lot of times we are appalled by emotion, and we just, this wall comes up and barriers, and we're not at our best. So that's a problem that you may encounter, that an INTJ his shortcomings might come up. And if you're just a little patient and you work with them and you communicate, like, in the future, do it like this. Instead of saying something like, you're just a cold, logical robot. You're criticizing them in a way that they can't change it. That's who they are. You don't like them, and they're stuck in that way forever and ever, ever. That's not good. Instead, they do something like that. You're emotional, and they shut down, or they're kind of harsh. Instead, what you do is you give positive encouragement. Say, thanks for letting me know, but in the future, it'd be better if you handled it like this. And that'd be really, it would strengthen things, and it makes sense. You could say studies show or whatever, but you want to give them a positive avenue where to go instead of doing it critically or negatively, which I don't think INFPs do. Just some general advice from my experience. As general, all NF types, they're very idealistic, and that means they see the world as they wish it to be, not as it is. Analytical types, they see the world how it is. So, that's where you guys are not going to always mesh up very well. And just like with ENFPs, though, you're going to have really great ideas. You're just not going to be able to tell the good ideas from bad ideas. And INTJ is going to be able to tell you, oh, that's a bad idea. It's a good idea. And sometimes they may not do it in a sensitive way. For example, INTJs, when we have an idea, it's not our child. We don't own it. You can criticize and tear it apart. We are separate from our idea. A lot of times people think we're egotistical. We're not. So when someone says, oh, that's a brilliant idea, I'm like, yes, that idea is good. It's not me. I'm not brilliant. The idea is. However, with NF types, I think they have a harder time separating themselves from their vision. So an INTJ, I think he may think he's criticizing your NF idea, and it's not you, but you are really attached to it, and it's rooted into your moral being. And he's not trying to be mean to you, but he is. But that's just where you guys are going to be different. And I don't think it's that big a deal. In the ENFP video I made about it, I talk about it. It's almost like the logic is like a laser. It's very scrutinizing and powerful. And it's like a monkey's piloting it. No offense, INFPs, if you're a monkey, but that's where the INTJs are a laser. The ENFP is a monkey piloting it. Oh, let's question metaphysics. Oh, let's question science. And they like it. However, when it goes to something that is personal to them, it hurts. And it's almost like a feedback loop when they scrutinize themselves. Like I said earlier, hot button issues like politics and religion, that kind of goes without saying. Most people know to treat those with care. However, sometimes since you're an NF, your ideas are very closely attached to who you are as a person. So you might say you like basketball really well. It's a great sport and it reflects so many things about humanity, whatever. And INTJ like, well, it's an inferior sport because of this and this, and you'll take umbrage to it. You'll be affronted to it. You'll take the criticism of the idea to yourself, and that happens a lot. And that's part of it. Is like you're the monkey on the laser. You got to guide that. That's your job. We're just analyzing things. It's like why you want to criticize these things that are not attached to you, but you don't like it when I criticize something that is tangentially related to your interests or your beliefs. And I don't know how deep those ties are. That's when you got to kind of give feedback and not take it personal. So ideally, an INTJ would be a little more sensitive, and INFP would be a little more thick-skinned, and you kind of meet in the middle. It's not ideal, but it's really not that big a deal. I think it's fine. But that's where you notice a lot of maturity and growth in both partners, where it is an issue or it isn't an issue. I think I covered everything. I got my notes here. I'm checking so I don't forget. I was just going to say some advice, aside from what I mentioned earlier. One thing I've read in self-help books and relationship books is it's a good idea to have like a once a week or once every other week checkup when you just talk about your relationship openly. You want to have it a very warm and accepting environment where someone can bring up something and it's no consequences. You can just talk about it openly. Don't be too critical of things they bring up. Don't be too dismissive. So once a week, you just talk about where's your relationship at? Where do you want it to go? Where are some problems you have? And both people should be able to bring up problems they talk about. And it should be a safe place. Like make it a regular thing. Because some of the character, excuse my popping my knuckles. Some of your character, both your character flaws, both of you guys will have poor social skills. It hasn't bothered me. I'm fine with not having good social skills. You both probably won't be good at chores. So if you're living together, you're not going to take care of the things you should take care of, as well as some other pairings. However, I think an INTJ would probably be more disciplined than the INFP. So I think they might do it, but sometimes my place gets a mess because I get focused on things. And things fall by the wayside. And that, I'm going off backtracking. That's one thing you may notice too with INTJs is they get tunnel vision when they're focusing on a problem. And they may neglect your needs. And if you notice that the person's not giving you what you need, and you don't bring it to their attention, they're not going to come to you. So you got to let them know. You got to communicate to them. Or it's been a while since we talked, or it's been a while since we've done something together, instead of assuming that he's reading your mind. But yeah, a once a week checkup is a pretty good thing. Just have Sunday night, get around for 10 minutes, and we just talk about us. How are we doing? Is everything what we're expecting, or is there a problem we need to really talk about? And sometimes with INFPs, it helps if you're upset with something, just to cool down a little bit and address it when you're a little bit more calm. Because like I said with an INTJ, he's hypersensitive to emotion. So if you come really super explosion of emotion, he's going to shut down he or her. The INTJ is going to pull back. So yeah, that safe space of once a week checkup kind of helps. Instead of just talking about movies or whatever, so they just talk about us, because you may not talk about each other directly. Last thing I think, which I don't think you guys all have a problem with, is I think INTJs with lots of other partners have trouble building intimacy. And a lot of times, if you read attachment theory, the INTJs also often get mislabeled as being avoidant. What that means basically is that they're afraid of intimacy, basically. There's a lot to it. I can make another video about it if you're really interested. But basically, they may appear cold and distant. And I don't think it'd be that big a deal for you if you're an INFP, because you'll be able to read him emotionally. But sometimes building that intimacy is hard, and the trick is with intimacy you have to have vulnerability. So he's got to let down his guard. And how to get the INTJ to do that is you have to have trust. And you have to build that. And I think an INFP is really good about that, because the person will listen to the INTJ and be able to read them. And if INTJ says something about his past, like, I was really bullied as a kid for this or that reason, and you emote with him and you show it, and I get you. Other people don't get you, but I do. I see how that's made you who you are, and I love that person who you are now. And that will help build the intimacy. But a lot of times I don't think couples know how to build that intimacy, because they're afraid of vulnerability. And a lot of times guys, they're afraid if they're let down their guard, they become more insecure and they become weaker. But you gotta let the guy know it's safe around me. I trust you. I approve of you. Let your guard down. And so there's mechanisms you can do that with it. But I don't think you're going to have trouble as an INFP. I think that's about all I wanted to say. Like, you can watch the other video I talked about. ENFP is a little more personal to me because I have much more experience. I probably have known INFPs over the years. I don't think I've dated them, but I probably met a few. It's not that uncommon of a type. But the fact that you're both N types helps a lot. So, yeah, hopefully it illuminates some things about INTJs, because we're so hard to figure out and we're so mysterious. Hope you enjoyed the video and it's helped you guys, and until next time.